Humans and other animal species have always insinuated themselves into each other's lives. Here we have the huntress goddess Artemis, or Diana, flanked by her deer, wearing medallions bearing other animal imagery. And today maybe we are simply becoming more aware of the decreasing distinction and increasing dependency between all species. Artists have always been fascinated with animals, whether domestic or wild, fake or real, natural or anthropomorphized. They allow and encourage us to reflect on the nature of sex, hunger and affection, family and gender relations, social and political spheres, and troubled histories. The appeal of animals allows us to entertain questions regarding structures of violence and domination, and so much more. Every day, we learn more about the subtleties and range of animal communications, how biologically close the human species is to even the simplest life forms, including trees. We actually share a quarter of their genes. Recent flus, viruses, and pandemics have made us more aware of cross-species viral infection and food chain issues. Clearly, human and other animal species and the environment we inhabit on and off land are intimately intertwined. And some humans, like this artist Stephanie Ross, blur the boundaries between species, assuming animal identities, which speaks to why and how we distinguish ourselves from other species and how we perceive and treat the other. Often that perception and treatment is exploitative, if not destructive. Through costume performance and drag interventions such as "Sweet little sis, such a good girl," which is what you say to a good dog, this artist transforms herself into imagined beings of multiple species, sexualities, and genders that convey the power of fluid identity. She draws from feminist theory, mythology, and her experience in a femme body, and resists classification. Ross sees her work as a process and product of ecstatic failure, in which she pushes her body to its limits, makes herself vulnerable, and becomes everything that she loves and desires, but can never touch. My home city, Pittsburgh, has an annual Anthrocon convention where people attend as their animal personae. It is a liberatory, personal, and collective action that can be both joyous and critical. Most, but not all, of the artists I will discuss participated in some of my past curatorial projects, like Fauna, Fathoming and Figuring, Animalia Agitatus, and When the Bough Breaks. Like Joseph Beuys's performative work and his notion of social sculpture, these artists' works tap into mythological and symbolic meanings of animals. They consider and link animal behavior to our own human species. They tell stories through animal imagery or invite the audience to create and activate their own stories. Patricia Bellin-Gillen quotes from Jonathan Gottschall's book, The Storytelling Animal, or How Stories Make Us Human, that speaks of archaeologists who dig up clues in the stones and bones and piece them together into a saga about the past to tell a story. And Bellin-Gillen uses visual stones and bones, images found through research and direct observation, and she fuses them into these enigmatic and intuitive relations. In the center right of this painting, we see a stack of stones that hold images from fossils in Pittsburgh's Museum of Natural History, the sedimentary stories of her title. The figures on the far left refer to explorer Edmund Hillary and his companions after descending from Mount Everest. They hold a giant squid, and her drawing is based on a composite of fossil squids like these, discovered in former seabeds that are now miles above our current sea levels. The wolf in the right side of the painting tugs away at the squid as if to pull it out of our view or perhaps help it escape. It personifies humans who resist discovery and deny science, who tug away at evolutionary stories that are literally written in stone. Here, the artist alludes to how scientific discoveries cause sea changes in our understanding of the world. The painting brings together the story of St. Francis's love of animals with thoughts about evolution and care of the ocean. Notice the wolf appearing again on the left. St. Francis wears Karl Heinrich Klingert's 1797 diving suit as he blesses the tube worms. And here's the diving suit and the tube worms, which we find at steam vents in the deepest ocean beds. On the left panel, we have the wolf submerged in the sea. Maybe it's the wolf that St. Francis tamed, the wolf that was terrorizing the people at Gubbio that we see in Sassetta's painting. St. Francis returns the wolf to the water as Synonyx. Synonyx is a wolf-like creature believed to have evolved into whales and dolphins, an example of a mammal returning to the sea, reversing prior assumptions about everything evolving from the sea. So Bellin Gillen merges religious and scientific narratives in ways that are both antagonistic and sympathetic to each other. Animals often serve as stand-ins for humans or human characteristics, from Native American and African trickster tales to the Greek fables of Aesop. They may be wise or foolish, perform heroic or magical deeds, act as mediators between heaven and earth, be helpful and harmful to humans, or both. As symbols and actors, animals represent the mystery and power of the natural or political world, which can create or destroy. This is Bellin Gillen's Beautiful Stories, remix Rocky J. Squirrel as Ratatoskr. And in Norse mythology, Ratatoskr is a squirrel with a tusk. His job is to run up and down Yggdrasil, the world tree, with messages. Here are just two versions of this world tree. Ratatoskr the squirrel annoys the good giant eagle living at the top and the evil giant serpent or snake or dragon living at the bottom of the tree. Now, some consider this squirrel neutral, but others say he carries insulting messages that will anger and lead the creatures at both ends to destroy the tree or the world. The artist grew up with the 1960s Bullwinkle show, where Rocky the flying squirrel and Bullwinkle the moose operate between the worlds of two superpowers. Their adventures stop the evil Boris and Natasha from destroying the world, and their Russian names evoked the Cold War mentality of the times. In her work, the artist draws a flurry of flying squirrels. Are they fanning the flames of war, or are they helpless witnesses? They fly behind two rings, maybe the ropes surrounding a perplexed boxer, or the political sphere of a world that contains Boris Badenov. This work suggests the traps of our idiotic marches to war, whether they're cold or hot, as well as all the delusions and complexities of, quote, coming to the rescue, end quote. In exploring the character of animals and our love for them, artists end up using animal imagery to expose our darker capacities as well, how we treat each other and other life forms with disdain, cruelty, and willful negligence in ways that expose our ignorance and inhumanity. We fear, suspect, and sometimes hate difference, whether of skin color, gender, religious affiliation, or nationality, which often get treated like a difference in species. LeVar Monroe, born in the Bahamas, encountered othering language like exotic, native, and islander, with all their implied linkages to the savage and uncivilized when he came to the United States. To explore this perception, he researched the 19th century human zoo phenomenon that included circuses, world's fairs, freak shows, and ethnic exhibits that put difference on display for consumption. Monroe's piece Bushman Bushmeat portrays a hybrid human animal in either horrific attack or defense mode, but it's also portrayed as meat to be consumed. Monroe's surfaces are cut, torn, stitched, stapled, and nursed. So through material and process, he enacts the history of exploitation and cruelty that still faces marginalized peoples. We are used to seeing carcasses and sacrificial animals in art, but the hybridity of these creatures and Monroe's aggressive surfaces make the violence more visceral. Limbs are amputated, ribbons are confused with gashes to the flesh. The status of his self-portrait as a prized pink pony is precarious, to say the least. This work is called Never Again, Human Conversations, which may speak to the genocidal campaigns that happen when we think of whole groups of people as subhuman animals or vermin. Andrew Ellis Johnson, who is in the exhibit Human Animal, often uses animal imagery to reflect on historical and current conditions of injustice. This piece, Lying Blanket, is woven from coral snakes, which are native to North America, and they are only poisonous if you bother them. These rubber coral snakes were made in China with patterns of red, yellow, and black. These are colors stereotypically associated with the non-Caucasian races, but Johnson whitewashes the colors, echoing the colonialist erasure of Native Americans through either assimilation or elimination, disease, and genocide. In mythology, snakes speak with forked tongues. They lie. The colonists were like snakes. Their charity was a lie. Their gift of blankets to Native Americans were infected with tuberculosis to wipe them out. Lying Blanket lets the viewer figure out whether or not the spiritual purity we ascribe to whiteness is merited. Johnson's 2015 video Strewn is also in the Human Animal show. It portrays pigs as enactors of human degradation and anti-intellectualism. We often use the word pig as an insult, but they are actually quite intelligent, and these pigs were quite ecstatic in this sea of books. This is the first shot in which flies buzz silently, but the scene ends with a piercing squeal. Everything after happens in a sea of books, where all taxonomies are equally disregarded and defiled, where technical manuals, self-help guides, or books on linguistic theory and political and philosophical speculation all become indistinguishable facets of liberated thought. Text and image, the coherent and incoherent, are spread, savored, and savaged without priority. The symbolic is shredded into a lexicon of loss. In fiction, if you think of Orwell's Animal Farm, swine have acted as agents of both revolution and repression. And in reality, they have been used by humans as agents of anti-intellectualism. During Pol Pot's genocidal regime in Cambodia, the National Library was used as a stable for pigs. Books were burned for cooking fires, their pages rolled for cigarette papers. Behind the library, the National Archives were used to house those who butchered pork to feed the soldiers. The library's garden was used for executing people. The uneducated were glorified, as they are in other countries today. And Johnson explores many conditions of greed and excess and their causes in his painting series Pathetic Fallacies, where creatures such as this frog are shown in absurd proportions. This is the study for this large painting, which is based on one of Mark Twain's short stories about a jumping frog contest. The main character fills his opponent's frog with ammunition, and it becomes too heavy to jump and loses the competition. Johnson's frog is bloated with mosquitoes and insects that we find in tropical climates of Central and Latin American countries. Its swollen belly acts as a metaphor for U.S. economic or foreign policies that use similar dirty tricks to win profit and power. Dirty tricks is too kind a word for such sustained policies that have done so much damage. Joshua Bianco, who studied with Johnson, made these huge drawings called Allusion, Illusion, and Illusion as a meditation on such policies, particularly those that led to Guantanamo Bay. Those in power often motivate others to do what they want by offering a carrot or threatening with a stick. In Allusion, the carrot no longer dangles from the stick. It is consumed by the one in power, the rider. It cannot be used to persuade the ass to move. The 6th American president, John Quincy Adams, issued the Monroe Doctrine, which boils down to, quote, speak softly and carry a big stick, end quote. And this stick offers nothing but raw power and force. The only carrot in the 1903 agreement to lease Guantanamo Bay was the 2,000 gold coins paid per year. But essentially, this agreement was forced upon Cuba by another president, Theodore Roosevelt. The repercussions and ongoing impasse surrounding Guantanamo unfold in illusion. Its camel stares into the eye of a needle, referring to scriptural passages where Jesus says, I tell you the truth, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. So resolving the injustice of Guantanamo is just as unlikely. Illusion is a meditation on the limits of art in communicating pain, suffering, and empathy. And the 3 drawings are cropped in a way that suggests how history repeats itself, Nietzsche's idea of eternal return. The 3 species create a caravan, repeating the actions of each other along an infinite timeline. When looking at images like these of Guantanamo prisoners taken by U.S. troops and worse images of tortured prisoners at Abu Ghraib, we often experience compassion fatigue. We become desensitized from so many images. We become unable to see or imagine how bad things really are. So Johnson bends and warps images in order to, and as the theorist Slavoj Žižek would say, quote, look awry at them in order to reinvest them with pathos. You will see this American eagle mask, which is a symbol of the United States, being bent and warped. And I'm only showing one sculpture from his Eternal Flames series that casts a warp eagle mask, collapsing and freezing it into hard marble. American eagle heads appear again in this collage somewhere over Geneva. They are on these presumed political prisoners who are actually my father, my nephews and nieces, and my son. The title refers to the Geneva Convention, which is an international agreement for protecting human rights, especially during wartime. This was made while George W. Bush was president, who thought we were above such international law. With fleece, Johnson deals with other violations of rights. This video installation addresses power struggles that surround land and water rights in the Middle East that still continue. The video projects a sheep with sounds of its bleating onto the floor of a sculptural well made of terracotta. It dissolves into reflections and the noise of helicopters overhead. Fleece speaks to the grievances of Palestinians, corroborated by Amnesty International, of wildcat settlers in Israel who sow rat poison that kills sheep, goats, and gazelles, and who throw dead birds into the wells. So the animals cease their labor, they no longer provide sustenance or income, the contaminated water is useless, the shepherds and farmers are thus fleeced, which is an English expression for stealing or depriving someone of their belongings by fraud or dirty tricks. This fleecing happens every day, everywhere within a globalized economy. Johnson's painting Downsizing presents a rat hanging from his own elongated tail that becomes a rope or umbilical cord. It chews through its tail to save its life or commit suicide. Now, downsizing was painted 25 years ago, but some things never change, like economies where obscene corporate profits continue to grow at the expense of poorly paid or laid off workers. Johnson's study for Futures presents another bloated pig. Painted in 2005, Futures foresaw current and future generations swung by the tail of a corporate oligarchy. Their wealth protects them from an erratic stock exchange or economic disaster. This future generation will have to live with our economic legacy, unable to afford basic needs, much less luxury goods. We return to Josh Bianco, who persists with animal imagery to explore the luxury economies of fashion and the art world through both pop and art market references. Instead of Joseph Beuys's visceral dead hair, we have artificial animals as cartoon monkeys or inflated bunnies. Bianco refers to the artist Jeff Koons' obscenely and expensively produced rabbit of highly polished stainless steel, and his monkey train prints, which auction for up to $20,000 to $30,000 at Sotheby's. Bianco transposes these art luxury items onto another luxury item in a work called Ever So Much More So, painting them onto the soles of Christian Louboutin trademark red stiletto high heels that retailed for $800 or more at the time. Here, Louboutin is looking at Josh's work at Neiman Marcus, a high-end store where they were displayed. These cartoon-like animals are as far from nature as you can get, highly stylized and highly commodified. And if you wear the shoes, the art will be ruined. So the shoes remain fetishized, inanimate objects that we protect and adore as if they have mystical qualities. Here, monetary value and superficialities of style displace any spirituality. Here, Bianco mimics the celebrity king or queen of pop art with Andy Warhol's celebrity paintings of Elvis from 1963. The Louboutin shoes replace Elvis's Wild West gun. And if only all weapons were only fancy shoes. And so we turn to war. I'm going to end with my own work that has used animal imagery to suggest both the impossibility and possibility of recovery from all the consequences of war. This series transformed images of wartime destruction in Lebanon, Iraq, and Afghanistan, all countries in the former Islamic Empire that once stretched from India to Spain. I began to imitate and insert passages from the scope of Islamic architecture. These birds are borrowed from Persian painting, but nest amidst contemporary rubble, impacted by its toxicity. Like humans, all creatures suffer from wars that they have nothing to do with creating, impacted by toxicity and the loss of habitat, but also like humans, they persist. Borrowing and painting life-affirming images does not minimize or deny the damage, but reminds us of the rich culture of our supposed enemies. It's one way to dispel dehumanizing ideas of difference, the stereotypes that link Muslims only to militancy and martyrdom. It celebrates the aspirations of a culture while acknowledging the devastation. So the eggs in these nests may or may not survive. In Rebirth, Eve's escort, we have the mythical peacock that bears Eve in the Quran. Adam rides a dragon. This is the same Eve that appears in the Bible. Eve's peacock is superimposed on an altered frame from Mike Shiley's film Inside Iraq. So, a living vehicle struts among dead mechanical ones. It is my version of a phoenix reborn from its own ashes. Here, a caravan of camels who serve as animal vehicles parade by, oblivious to human destruction. Horses also transport humans. Here, a thirsty and riderless horse stands at the edge of a bomb crater on a bridge in Iraq, its tail flowing like a river of blood. We have the tradition of the riderless horse, suggesting the fallen warrior. Empty saddles and boots reversed in stirrups symbolize the departed who will never ride again, especially in military and police funerals. This tradition supposedly dates from the time of Genghis Khan, when Mongols believed that the spirit of a sacrificed horse went through a gate to the sky to serve its fallen warrior in the afterlife. It still amazes me that after so many wars, we continue to treat war as a game, from a rocking horse to the grave. Here we have two ancient warriors on horses forced into battle, a tug of war between what's left of Uday Hussein's destroyed Ferrari. Uday was Saddam Hussein's eldest son, who was killed by special ops forces in Mosul. Whether animal or mechanical, all these vehicles came to embody for me the human machismo that both feeds and entraps so many abuses of power. In my Equus series, I converted the mangled remains of blown-up vehicles to pedestals for painted silhouettes of equestrian statues. The riders remain static and anonymous, even if their poses are active. They vary from nationalist liberators to conquering emperors, and whether they're villains or good guys, they represent those who use violence as means to an end. It is the tails of the horses that come alive as sensuous appendages that are impossibly long and that get trampled by their own bravado and caught in the machinery. I'll end with this work from Egypt, where I traveled in 2011 right after the revolution and photographed this rubble in Alexandria. I hand-painted birds into these environments for my Springtime in Alexandria series. The ibis bird has been honored as a symbol of Thoth, an important Egyptian deity. The ibis was considered to be the heart, which for ancient Egyptians is the seat of intelligence or the mind, not of emotion. And ibises were often mummified and venerated, and in historical and mythological accounts, the bird is also seen as a protector because it devoured invasions of winged serpents. In this series, the ibis pecks and struts amidst the rubble of a civic building that was reportedly destroyed by those in power in order to ruin the records of their own corruption. But this ibis is oblivious to the political upheaval. It goes about its business to survive. And when I made this, I was optimistic and hoped the ibis could represent the logic and intelligence necessary to rebuild any nation after any revolution into a more equitable society. I hoped the ibis could stand as a protector against replacement tyranny. And I hope that the animals in all of the images I have shown today activate and agitate us to respond to the inequities and injustices of the world, to overcome the idea of alternate facts and fake news, to question torture and incarceration across species, to question our acquisitive drive, our sense of superiority and thirst for power that leads to persecutions of difference, imperialist interventions across nations, and colonizing and debilitating greed. To find alternatives to the chronic and rampant violence as an answer to any conflict, and to offer the possibility of rebirth and revisioning a sustainable and just society for all living things, for life. Thank you.